The wind howled through Silver Creek like a wounded beast, but nothing could prepare this broken sheriff for the storm that was about to enter his life. A war nurse with secrets, a silent child with extraordinary gifts, and a love story that would change everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow this incredible journey of healing, redemption, and the miracles that happen when two wounded souls find each other in the untamed West. The gunslinger's heart, when a war nurse tamed the broken sheriff's soul. The morning sun cast long shadows across Silver Creek's main street as Sheriff Nathan Cross adjusted the leather holster at his hip, empty as it had been for 4 years. The weight of his deputy's badge felt heavier than any gun he'd ever carried, a reminder of promises made and oaths that bound him to a life he'd never wanted. Nathan stood 6 feet tall with weathered hands that had once been steady enough to put a bullet through a silver dollar at 50 paces. Now those same hands trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee cup, betraying the ghost that haunted his sleep. Sheriff Cross, the voice belonged to Tommy Rivera, his young deputy, barely 23, with eager eyes that reminded Nathan too much of himself at that age. Before the war, before Elena, before everything went to hell. "What is it, Tommy?" The new school teachers arrived on the morning stage. Doc Harrison asked if you'd escort her to the boarding house. Nathan's jaw tightened. Another Easterner come to civilize the frontier, no doubt. They never lasted long once winter set in and reality replaced their romantic notions of the West. "Can't you handle it?" "She specifically asked for you, Sheriff. Said she'd heard about your reputation." That reputation. Nathan Cross, the Phantom of Gettysburg. The man who could draw and fire 6 shots before most men could clear leather. The legend that had died the same day his wife bled out in their bedroom while he was chasing rustlers 20 miles away. Nathan grabbed his hat from the desk. "Let's get this over with." The woman waiting beside the stagecoach wasn't what he'd expected. Most Eastern ladies arrived in elaborate dresses with more bustle than sense. This one wore a practical gray traveling suit, her auburn hair pinned back in a severe bun. She stood with the posture of someone accustomed to carrying herself through difficult times. But it was her eyes that stopped Nathan cold. Green as spring grass with depths that spoke of battles fought and scars carried. Eyes he'd seen before in a place that smelled of blood and antiseptic, where screams echoed off canvas walls. "Sheriff Cross," her voice carried a slight Boston accent, refined but not soft. "I'm Evangeline McKenna, the new school teacher." Nathan touched the brim of his hat, trying to shake the feeling of déjà vu. "Miss McKenna, welcome to Silver Creek." "Thank you." She gestured to her single trunk and carpet bag. "I was told Mrs. Chen's boarding house would have a room available." "Tommy here will see to your luggage. The boarding house is just down the street." As they walked, Nathan found himself stealing glances at her profile. Something about the way she carried herself, the way her eyes constantly assessed their surroundings, suggested this was no ordinary school teacher. "You're staring, Sheriff." Heat crept up Nathan's neck. "My apologies, Miss McKenna. You just remind me of someone. Someone you knew well. Someone who saved my life once, long time ago." Evangeline Angel, she'd introduced herself, stopped walking. For just a moment, her composed mask slipped, revealing something that might have been in recognition. Then it was gone. "Well," she said softly, "perhaps good deeds have a way of coming full circle, Mrs. Chen's boarding house was a 2-story structure painted cheerful yellow, a splash of color in the dusty street. Sarah Chen, a petite Chinese woman in her 50s, emerged to greet them. "Ah, Sheriff Cross, and you must be Miss McKenna." Sarah's English carried the precise diction of someone who'd learned it as a second language, but spoke it better than most natives. "Welcome to Silver Creek. I have prepared the best room for our new teacher." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Angel's smile transformed her face, warming those serious green eyes. "I'm grateful for your kindness." As Sarah bustled inside with Angel's bags, Nathan found himself reluctant to leave. "Miss McKenna, if you need anything, directions to the schoolhouse, introductions to the town council." "Actually, Sheriff, there is something." Angel lowered her voice. "I was hoping to learn more about the previous teacher. Miss Wilson, I believe I understand she left rather suddenly." Nathan's expression darkened. Mary Wilson had been the 3rd teacher to leave Silver Creek in 2 years, though her departure hadn't been entirely voluntary. Miss Wilson found frontier life challenging. Not everyone's suited for it out here. I see. Angel's eyes held his steadily. And I suppose the recent troubles with rustlers and attacks on local ranches have made things even more difficult. Nathan stiffened. News of the attacks hadn't been made public yet, and certainly wouldn't have reached Boston newspapers. Where did you hear about that? Word travels quickly along stage routes. Sheriff, drivers talk, passengers listen. Angel's tone remained casual, but Nathan caught the slight tensing of her shoulders. I simply wanted to know what I'm walking into. Before Nathan could respond, a small figure darted around the corner of the boarding house and crashed into his legs. Ruby Cross's 8-year-old daughter wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face against his badge. Nathan's expression softened completely as he knelt to his daughter's level. Ruby hadn't spoken since that terrible night 4 years ago, but she communicated volumes through touch and expression. Her dark eyes, Elena's eyes, were wide with something between excitement and anxiety. What is it, little star? Nathan signed the words as he spoke a skill he'd learned from Doc Harrison. Ruby had never learned formal sign language, but they developed their own system of communication. Ruby's small hands moved quickly, telling him about a stranger asking questions about their family, about Deputy Morrison sniffing around their house again. Angel watched this exchange with obvious interest. Your daughter, Ruby. Nathan's voice held both love and fierce protection. She doesn't talk to strangers. I understand. Angel knelt as well, bringing herself to Ruby's eye level. Instead of speaking, she simply smiled and made a gentle gesture, placing her hand over her heart, then extending it toward Ruby with an open palm. Ruby tilted her head, studying this new woman with the intensity she brought to everything. Then, to Nathan's amazement, she stepped forward and placed her small hand briefly against Angel's open palm before retreating to her father's side. Well, Angel said softly, that's the nicest introduction I've had in months. Nathan stared between his daughter and the school teacher. Ruby hadn't voluntarily touched a stranger since Elena's death. She was usually so wary of newcomers that it took weeks for her to warm up to anyone. She likes you, he said, unable to hide his surprise. Children often sense things adults miss. Angel rose gracefully. Sheriff, would it be possible to visit the schoolhouse this afternoon? I'd like to see what I'm working with before classes begin Monday. Of course. Tommy can show you. Actually, I was hoping you might escort me. I have a feeling you know more about this town's children than anyone else. Nathan found himself agreeing before he could think of a reason to refuse. As Angel disappeared into the boarding house with Mrs. Chen, Ruby tugged on his sleeve. Her hands moved rapidly. The lady smells like medicine. And sadness. But not the bad kind of sadness. Nathan frowned. What do you mean, little star? Ruby's next gestures were more complex, involving concepts she usually struggled to express. Like your sadness, the kind that comes from loving someone who went away. Before Nathan could process this fully, Deputy Morrison appeared around the corner, his young face flushed with excitement. Sheriff, we got another one. The Henderson Ranch was hit last night. Same pattern as the others, livestock scattered but nothing actually stolen. And Sheriff, Morrison's voice dropped. They left a message this time. Nathan felt ice form in his veins. What kind of message? Carved into the barn door, said the past always comes calling Nathan. The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. Only one person had ever called him by his first name in that particular tone, with that particular weight of shared history and bitter disappointment. Cornelius Blackwood. Nathan's hand instinctively moved toward his empty holster muscle memory, overriding 4 years of deliberate denial. Ruby noticed the gesture and pressed closer to his side, her small hand finding his and squeezing gently. Tommy, I want you to ride out to the Henderson place. Take statements from everyone, look for tracks, the usual. But don't go alone, take Pete with you. What about you, Sheriff? Nathan looked toward the boarding house where Angel McKenna had disappeared, his mind racing with connections he didn't want to make. A school teacher who knew about attacks that hadn't been reported. A woman who looked familiar, who reminded him of someone from his past. And now a message that suggested his past was indeed coming calling. I need to pay a visit to our new school teacher, he said grimly. Something tells me Miss McKenna and I have more to discuss than the condition of the schoolhouse. As if summoned by his words, Angel emerged from the boarding house, having changed from her traveling clothes into a simple blue dress that somehow made her eyes seem even more vivid. She'd loosened her hair slightly, and Nathan caught his breath as afternoon sunlight turned the auburn strands to burnished copper. "Ready for that tour, Sheriff?" "Miss McKenna," Nathan said carefully, "I think we need to talk." Something flickered in her eyes, wariness perhaps, or recognition of a game that was about to become more serious. "Of course, Sheriff. I find that honest conversation is usually the best foundation for any relationship." As they walked toward the schoolhouse, Ruby skipping between them with uncharacteristic lightness, Nathan found himself wondering just how honest their conversation was about to become. Because the more he watched Evangeline McKenna, the more certain he became that she was no ordinary schoolteacher. And given the message carved into the Henderson barn, ordinary was the last thing Silver Creek needed right now. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure with large windows designed to catch the morning light. Angel examined everything with the thoroughness of someone conducting an inspection rather than a casual tour. "How many children attend regularly?" she asked, running her fingers along the slate board. "About 15, depending on the season, more in winter when the ranch work slows down." Nathan watched her carefully. "Miss McKenna, can I ask what brought you to Silver Creek specifically? There are teaching positions closer to Boston that would pay better and offer more amenities." Angel paused in her examination of the bookshelf. "Perhaps I was looking for something I couldn't find in the city, Sheriff. Sometimes a person needs to go to the frontier to discover who they really are." "And who are you really, Miss McKenna?" She turned to face him fully, and for a moment Nathan saw past the controlled exterior to something raw and hurting underneath. "I'm someone who's lost more than she's found," she said quietly. "Someone who came west because the past finally became too heavy to carry alone." Ruby, who had been exploring the schoolhouse with obvious delight, suddenly went very still. Her head tilted in that way Nathan recognized she was sensing something the adults couldn't perceive. The little girl moved to the window and pointed toward the hills beyond town. Her hands moved urgently. "Bad men coming. Soon." Nathan felt the familiar chill that always preceded trouble. Ruby's intuition had never been wrong, not since that terrible night when it had tried to warn them about the men approaching their house. "Miss McKenna," he said, his voice taking on the authority of 4 years in the badge, "I think it's time you told me exactly why you're really here." Angel looked from Nathan to Ruby, whose small face was tight with concern. When she spoke, her careful Boston accent slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "My name is Evangeline McKenna, and I am a school teacher," she said. "But you're right, that's not why I came to Silver Creek." Nathan waited, his hand resting protectively on Ruby's shoulder. "I came here to find out how my brother died." The words hung between them like smoke from a gunshot. Nathan felt his world tilt, as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving suddenly clicked into place. "James McKenna," he said slowly. "Deputy James McKenna. You remember him?" "I remember everything about that night." Nathan's voice was rough with old pain. "James was my partner, my best friend. He died because I couldn't get to him in time." Angel's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "He died because someone wanted him dead, Sheriff. And I think you know exactly who that someone was." Before Nathan could respond, the sound of hoofbeats reached them, multiple horses riding hard toward town. Ruby pressed closer to her father, her silent communication becoming frantic. "The bad men. They're here." Nathan drew his deputy's star and pressed it into Angel's hand. "Take Ruby to Mrs. Chen's, lock the doors, and don't come out until I give the all clear." "Sheriff." "Now, Miss McKenna, if you really are who you claim to be, then you know what's at stake here." Angel nodded curtly, taking Ruby's hand, but as they reached the schoolhouse door, she turned back. "Nathan." The use of his first name stopped him cold. Only one person outside of Elena had ever spoken his name with that particular combination of familiarity and concern. "The field hospital at Gettysburg," Angel said softly. "You were delirious with fever from a bullet wound in your shoulder. You kept calling for someone named Elena, said you had to get back to her." Nathan's vision blurred as memory crashed over him like a wave. The smell of antiseptic and blood. Gentle hands cleaning his wound. A voice with a Boston accent whispering, "You're going to live, soldier. You're going to make it back to your Elena." "Angel," he breathed. "Nurse Angel, but you're supposed to be—" "Dead, yes, well, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." Her smile held no humor. We'll have to continue this reunion later, Sheriff. Right now, I believe you have visitors. As Angel disappeared with Ruby toward the boarding house, Nathan stepped out of the schoolhouse to face whatever was coming down the main street of Silver Creek. 5 riders approached at a steady pace, their faces hidden by hat brims and bandanas. But Nathan recognized the way the lead rider sat his horse, the particular arrogance in his posture. Cornelius Blackwood, his former commanding officer, the man who had tried to recruit him for less than legal enterprises after the war. The man Nathan had refused making an enemy that had apparently decided to collect on old debts. Nathan's hand moved automatically toward his empty holster, then stopped. He'd made a promise the day Elena died, carved it into her headstone along with his love. Never again will violence solve what words and law cannot. But as Blackwood and his men reined in 20 feet away, Nathan wondered if some promises were meant to be broken. Nathan Cross, Blackwood called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. You're looking well for a dead man. Blackwood, Nathan kept his voice level. Can't say the same for you. Blackwood laughed, a sound like grinding stone. 4 years of legitimate business will do that to a man, but I've decided it's time to expand my operations, starting with Silver Creek. This is a peaceful town. We don't want trouble. Peace, Blackwood spat in the dust. You always were too soft, Nathan. Even in the war, you had to make everything complicated with your conscience and your rules. Nathan was aware of doors opening along the main street of townspeople gathering to watch the confrontation. Tommy Rivera appeared at the end of the street with Pete, both young men looking uncertain but determined. What do you want, Blackwood? What I've always wanted. Your skills in service of my vision. The Nathan Cross I knew could clear a room of hostiles in seconds, could track a man across 3 states and never lose the trail. That kind of talent shouldn't be wasted wearing a tin star in some forgotten frontier town. That man died 4 years ago. Did he, Blackwood's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Because I heard he might be coming back to life, especially if the right motivation was provided. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind ran down Nathan's spine. What motivation? Instead of answering, Blackwood reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a photograph. Even from 20 feet away, Nathan could make out the image, Elena laughing as she hung laundry on the line behind their house. Beautiful woman, you're Elena. Shame what happened to her. Nathan's control snapped like a dry branch. You son of a... Careful, Sheriff. Blackwood's voice carried quiet menace. Wouldn't want to say something you'd regret, especially with all these witnesses around. You killed her. The words came out as a whisper, but they carried the weight of 4 years' worth of suppressed rage. I gave some associates directions to your house, yes, with instructions to bring you a message about reconsidering my offer. If your wife got caught in the crossfire, Blackwood shrugged. Well, that's the price of being stubborn. Nathan was dimly aware of Ruby's face pressed against the window of the boarding house, of Angel's protective arm around her, of Tommy and Pete moving closer with their hands near their weapons, of the entire town holding its breath. Here's what's going to happen, Blackwood continued. You're going to help me acquire some properties I'm interested in, starting with the Henderson's Ranch and a few others. Your reputation will make the negotiations much smoother. And if I refuse, Blackwood's smile was cold as winter. Well, let's just say accidents happen, even in peaceful towns like Silver Creek. Children are particularly vulnerable to accidents, don't you think? The threat to Ruby shattered the last of Nathan's restraint. His hand moved toward his empty holster with muscle memory that 4 years couldn't erase, only to close on nothing but leather. Blackwood laughed. Oh, that's right. The great Nathan Cross doesn't carry a gun anymore. How principled of you. Sheriff, at Tommy's voice cut through the tension. The young deputy was offering Nathan his spare Colt handle first. Nathan stared at the weapon. 4 years since he had held a gun with violent intent. 4 years of trying to be a different man, a better man, the kind of father Elena would have wanted Ruby to have. But Elena was dead because of the man sitting 20 feet away, smirking with the confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. Sheriff Cross, Angel's voice came from behind him, clear and carrying despite the distance. Sometimes the only way to protect peace is to be prepared for war. Nathan turned to see her standing in the doorway of the boarding house, Ruby still at her side. Angel's face was set with determination, and she was holding something in her hands, a gun belt, a well-maintained Colt Peacemaker in a holster that looked like it had seen considerable use. "This belonged to my brother," Angel called out. "James always said a good gun in righteous hands was the best defense against evil." Nathan looked from Angel to Blackwood to the faces of the townspeople who depended on him to keep them safe. Ruby's eyes met his through the boarding house window, and he saw not fear there, but trust. Complete unwavering faith that her father would do what was right. Sometimes Nathan realized doing what was right meant becoming someone you'd hoped never to be again. He took Tommy's gun and checked the cylinder. 6 shots, all chambers loaded. "Blackwood," he said quietly, "you have one chance to ride out of here and never come back. Or what, you'll shoot me down in cold blood in front of all these witnesses." Nathan's laugh held no humor. "No, Cornelius, I'll give you the same chance you gave Elena. I'll count to 10. The street went dead silent, except for the whisper of wind through the eaves. "You're bluffing," Blackwood said, but his hand had moved to rest on his own weapon. 1. "Nathan, you don't want to do this." 2. Blackwood's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their guns, but Nathan's attention was focused entirely on their leader, on the man who had destroyed his family and threatened to destroy what was left. 3. "You always were too sentimental, Nathan. It's going to get you killed." 4. Nathan's hand moved to rest on the grip of Tommy's Colt. Muscle memory flooded back the weight of the weapon, the angle of the draw, the feel of metal against palm. 5. Blackwood was no longer smiling. His men were looking increasingly nervous, glancing between their boss and the sheriff, who stood like a statue in the middle of the dusty street. 6. "This isn't over, Nathan, even if you kill me." 7. "My men will burn this town to the ground, starting with that boarding house." Nathan's eyes flicked to the window where Ruby watched, then to Angel standing in the doorway with her brother's gun belt still in her hands. 8. Blackwood's nerve finally broke. "You're crazy. You know that completely." 9. The word hung in the air like smoke. Nathan's hand tightened on the gun grip, ready to clear leather, and end 4 years of living with Elena's death on his conscience. "Wait." The voice came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Chen stepping out of the boarding house with a shotgun cradled in her arms, like she'd been born to it. "Mr. Blackwood," she said in her precise English, "I think you should know that Silver Creek has more protectors than just our sheriff." Doors opened all along the main street. Doc Harrison emerged from his clinic with a rifle. Pete and Tommy flanked Nathan with their weapons drawn. Even old Sam from the general store had appeared with what looked like a buffalo gun. But it was Angel who provided the final surprise. She'd moved from the boarding house doorway to a position that gave her a clear shot at Blackwood's men, her brother's Colt held with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. "Looks like you're outnumbered, Cornelius," Nathan said quietly. Blackwood's eyes swept the scene, calculating odds that were no longer in his favor. When he spoke, his voice held the promise of future retribution. "This isn't finished, Nathan. Not by a long shot." "Yes, it is." Nathan drew the Colt in one smooth motion, the barrel aimed directly at Blackwood's chest. "Because if I see you or any of your men near Silver Creek again, I won't bother counting to 10. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the dusty street. Then Blackwood wheeled his horse around and spurred it toward the edge of town, his men following in hasty retreat. Nathan didn't holster the gun until the riders disappeared over the first hill. When he finally did, his hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline rush of being Nathan Cross, gunfighter, one more time. "Sheriff," Tommy's voice was awed. That was incredible. I mean, I knew you had a reputation, but seeing it." Nathan handed the gun back to his deputy and walked toward the boarding house where Angel waited with Ruby pressed against her side. "Miss McKenna," he said formally, "I believe we have that conversation to finish." Angel nodded, then did something that surprised everyone watching. She holstered her brother's gun with the smooth competence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. "Yes, Sheriff Cross," she said quietly. "I believe we do." As the crowd dispersed and normal life resumed on Silver Creek's main street, Nathan found himself facing a truth he'd been avoiding for 4 years. Some ghosts refused to stay buried. And sometimes the only way to find peace was to face them head on. But first he needed to understand exactly who Evangeline McKenna really was, and why her arrival had coincided so perfectly with Blackwood's return. Because Nathan Cross had learned long ago that coincidences were usually anything but coincidental. The evening shadows were growing long when Nathan finally sat down with Angel in the boarding house parlor. Mrs. Chen had taken Ruby to the kitchen for cookies and tea, giving the adults privacy for what promised to be a difficult conversation. "James wrote to me about you," Angel began without preamble. "In his last letter, he said you were the best man he'd ever served with, but that something had broken inside you after the war." Nathan studied her face in the lamplight. Away from the harsh afternoon sun, he could see the resemblance to James more clearly, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her eyes assessed everything before speaking. James was a good man. He deserved a better partner. He deserved a partner who didn't get him all. The words came out harsher than Nathan intended, but Angel didn't flinch. "Is that what you think happened?" "I know what happened. James was investigating rustling activities on the Henderson ranch. I was supposed to meet him there, but Ruby had a fever that night, and Nathan's voice trailed off. "By the time I got there, he was already dead, shot 3 times in the back. By rustlers." "That's what I assumed, what everyone assumed." Nathan met her eyes. "But after today, after Blackwood's little visit, you think it was connected?" "I think your brother discovered something that got him killed, and I think you know more about it than you're letting on." Angel was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of long-held secrets. "James didn't just write to me about rustlers, Nathan. He wrote about a conspiracy, about someone using Silver Creek as a base for acquiring ranch land through intimidation and worse. He said he had proof, but he needed help from someone he could trust completely." Nathan's chest tightened. "He asked for my help." "He was going to. That last letter. He said he was planning to approach you about it after he gathered more evidence. He never got the chance because someone killed him first." Angel nodded. "Someone who knew he was getting close to the truth. And you came here to find out who." "I came here to finish what my brother started." Angel's voice hardened. "And to make sure the person responsible paid for what they did." Nathan found himself admiring her determination, even as he worried about her safety. "This isn't Boston, Miss McKenna. Out here seeking justice can get you killed just as easily as seeking revenge." "Then it's a good thing I'm not seeking revenge, Sheriff." Angel's smile held no warmth. "I'm seeking truth. Justice can follow once we have that." Before Nathan could respond, Ruby appeared in the doorway, her small face serious. Mrs. Chen hovered behind her, clearly concerned. "Sheriff," Mrs. Chen said, "the child says there are more men coming, different ones this time." Nathan felt his blood chill. "How many little Ruby's hands moved quickly. 3, but they feel different, not angry like the others. Scared. The sound of approaching horses confirmed Ruby's warning. Nathan moved to the window and saw 3 riders approaching at a cautious pace. Not the aggressive charge of Blackwood's men, but the careful approach of people who weren't sure of their welcome. "Stay inside," Nathan told Angel and Mrs. Chen. "Tommy should be making rounds about now. If anything goes wrong." "Sheriff Cross." The voice that called out was young, female, and desperate. Nathan stepped onto the porch to see a woman in her 20s dismounting from a tired horse, 2 men flanking her protectively. "Please," she called out, "we need help. My name is Victoria Blackwood. I'm Cornelius Blackwood's daughter." Nathan's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. If this is some kind of trick, it's not. Victoria stepped into the light spilling from the boarding house windows. She was blonde and pretty, but her clothes were disheveled and her eyes held the kind of fear that couldn't be faked. "My father, he's planning something terrible. Something that will destroy this entire town." Angel appeared at Nathan's shoulder despite his earlier instruction to stay inside. "Miss Blackwood, what kind of something?" Victoria's gaze darted between Nathan and Angel, clearly trying to assess whether she could trust them. "He's not just after the ranch land," she said finally. "He's working with someone else, someone with connections to the railroad companies. They want to run a spur line through Silver Creek, but the current property owners won't sell. So they're using intimidation to force them out," Nathan said grimly. "Intimidation is just the beginning." Victoria's voice shook. "If that doesn't work, they're planning to make it look like there's an Indian uprising in the area, burned ranches, murdered families. Anything to drive people away so the land can be bought cheap. Nathan felt sick. And you know this how? Because I was supposed to help coordinate it. Victoria's composure cracked completely. My father arranged for me to marry one of his partners to cement their alliance. But when I overheard them planning to kill women and children, she couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Angel stepped forward, her nurse's instincts taking over despite the danger. Miss Blackwood, you're safe now, but we need to know everything, names, dates, locations. His main partner is a man named Morrison, railroad executive from Denver. They're planning to start the false attacks tomorrow night, beginning with the ranches furthest from town. Nathan's blood ran cold. Morrison. The same name that had appeared in James McKenna's final report, the one that had been dismissed as unfounded suspicion. Miss Blackwood, he said carefully, do you have any proof of this plan? Victoria reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a leather portfolio. Letters, contracts, even a map showing which properties they want and in what order they plan to acquire them. Angel accepted the portfolio and began examining its contents by lamplight. Her face grew grimmer with each document. Nathan, she said quietly, this is it. This is what James died for. Before Nathan could respond, Ruby burst through the boarding house door and ran to his side. Her hands moved frantically. Bad men coming back. Many bad men. Very angry. The sound of hoofbeats confirmed Ruby's warning, but this time it was more than 5 horses. Much more. How many? Nathan asked his daughter. Ruby's expression was frightened as she signed, too many to count. And they have fire. Nathan saw the orange glow on the horizon. At the same moment, he smelled smoke on the wind. Blackwood wasn't waiting for tomorrow night to begin his campaign of terror. He was starting it now. Everyone inside, Nathan commanded. Mrs. Chen, is there a root cellar or someplace defensible? The basement has thick stone walls. Mrs. Chen replied, already herding Ruby toward the stairs. Angel checked the loads in her brother's gun, her movements quick and professional. How many men can you count on, Sheriff? Tommy, Pete, Doc Harrison, maybe a few others if we're lucky. Nathan was calculating odds that looked increasingly grim. Not enough if Blackwood brought as many as it sounds like. Then we need to even the odds. Angel moved to the window and studied the approaching glow. How well do you know the terrain around Silver Creek? Retry JN, continue edit, like the back of my hand. Why? Because if we can't outfight them, maybe we can outthink them. Angel's eyes held the calculating look of someone who'd survived more than one desperate situation. James taught me a few things about military tactics before he headed west. Nathan found himself reassessing the woman beside him. What did you have in mind? Tell me about the canyon road coming into town, the one from the north. Narrow passage, steep walls on both sides. Why? Angel smiled grimly. Because every good tactician knows that the best place to stop a larger force is at a choke point they have to pass through. Before Nathan could ask what she meant, the sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the Henderson Ranch. Orange flames began to lick at the horizon, and the acrid smell of smoke grew stronger. They're burning the ranches, Victoria whispered, her face pale, just like they planned. Nathan made a decision that would have horrified him 6 hours earlier. Miss McKenna, I need you to take Ruby, Mrs. Chen, and Miss Blackwood to the church. It's the most defensible building in town, and Father Miguel has a hunting rifle. What about you? I'm going to gather every man who can hold a gun, and we're going to stop this before it reaches the town proper. Angel stepped closer, her voice low but intense. Nathan, you can't face Blackwood's entire force head-on. You'll be slaughtered. Then what do you suggest? You said you know the terrain. Is there a way to approach the canyon road from above? Nathan's mind immediately went to the old mining trail that wound up the ridge, overlooking the pass. Yes, but it would take an hour to reach the position, and that's if we had horses. What if you didn't need horses? What if they came to you? Understanding began to dawn on Nathan's face. You want to draw them into a trap. I want to make them think they're chasing easy prey when actually they're walking into an ambush. Angel's voice held the confidence of someone who'd seen desperate plans work before. But it would require someone to act as bait. Absolutely not. Nathan, I said no. I won't risk your life or anyone else's on a plan that dangerous. Angel moved to the window and studied the approaching flames. When she turned back, her expression was resolute. It's not your choice to make, Sheriff. James died trying to protect this town and its people. I won't let his sacrifice be meaningless. Ruby tugged on Nathan's sleeve, her small hands moving urgently. The lady is right, Papa. Sometimes the only way to win is to be brave enough to lose. Nathan looked down at his daughter, amazed once again by her wisdom. Then he looked at Angel, seeing not just the refined school teacher or even the war nurse, but someone who understood sacrifice and duty as well as he did. What exactly did you have in mind? Angel moved to the table where Victoria's documents were spread and began sketching a rough map of the area around Silver Creek. From what Miss Blackwood told us, they want to make this look like an Indian attack. That means they'll try to drive the survivors toward town, creating panic and forcing people to abandon their property. So we give them what they want. Up to a point. Angel's finger traced a route on her improvised map. Someone needs to ride hard from the direction of the burning ranches, making it look like they're fleeing in terror. The raiders will naturally follow, thinking they're pursuing scared civilians. Nathan was beginning to see the strategy, and when they reach the canyon pass, your men will be waiting on the ridge above. Classic military ambush, high ground cover, and an enemy trapped in a killing field. Victoria looked up from where she'd been listening with growing alarm. But whoever acts as bait would have to stay ahead of armed men for miles. In the dark, if they caught up, they won't catch up, Angel said quietly, because the person playing bait will know exactly where they're going and how to get there fastest. Nathan realized what she was proposing. You want to be the bait. I'm the logical choice. I know the plan. I can ride well enough to stay ahead of pursuit, and I'm expendable. You are not expendable. The words came out harder than Nathan intended. And I won't let you risk your life for this town. Angel stepped closer, her green eyes holding his steadily. Nathan, in about 30 minutes, Cornelius Blackwood is going to ride into Silver Creek with enough men to kill everyone here, including Ruby. Are you really going to let pride stop you from accepting help that could save her life? The reminder of his daughter cut through Nathan's protective instincts like a knife. Ruby was everything good left in his world, and if she died because he'd been too stubborn to accept a dangerous but necessary plan, there has to be another way. There isn't, not one that doesn't involve a lot more people dying. Angel's voice softened slightly. Nathan, I've seen what happens when good people try to fight evil without taking risks. The evil wins. Every time. Ruby appeared at Nathan's side again, having apparently escaped Mrs. Chen's attempts to keep her safely upstairs. Her small hands moved with unusual urgency. Papa, the fire smell is getting stronger. And there are new sounds now. Scared sounds. Nathan listened and realized Ruby was right. Beneath the crackling of distant flames and the thunder of approaching hoofbeats, he could hear something else screaming. The sound of terrified families fleeing their burning homes. All right, he said grimly, but we do this my way. And if anything goes wrong, if you're in real danger, you forget the plan and save yourself. Understood. Angel nodded. Understood. Victoria, can you and your men get word to the families between here and the fires? Tell them to head for the church, not to try and fight. Of course, Nathan turned to Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly preparing for siege in the way of someone who'd survived more than one crisis. Sarah, I need you to take Ruby to Father Miguel. Tell him what's happening and ask him to ring the church bell if he sees our signal from the ridge. Miss Chen nodded efficiently. What signal? 3 shots fired in rapid succession. That means the ambush worked and it's safe to come out. Ruby hugged Nathan fiercely, her small body trembling slightly. When she pulled back, her hands moved with the careful precision she used for important messages. Come back safe, Papa. The lady needs you, and I need you both. Before Nathan could ask what she meant by that, Ruby had taken Mrs. Chen's hand and disappeared up the stairs to gather their emergency supplies. Angel was checking her weapons one final time, her brother's Colt and a small Derringer she'd apparently been carrying concealed. Miss McKenna, Nathan said formally, if we don't make it through this, we will. But if we don't, I want you to know that meeting you again here and now feels like a gift I didn't deserve. Angel paused in her preparations and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Nathan, there is something else I need to tell you. About Gettysburg, about why I really came to Silver Creek. The sound of approaching riders was getting louder, accompanied now by shouts and the crackle of spreading flames. Later, Nathan said, after we stop Blackwood. Angel nodded, then did something that surprised them both. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek gently. "For luck," she said softly, "and because James would have wanted me to look after his partner." Then she was gone, slipping out the back door of the boarding house toward the stable where her horse waited. Nathan spent the next few minutes gathering weapons and ammunition, his mind focused on the tactical challenges ahead. But part of him was already thinking beyond the immediate crisis to questions that needed answers and feelings that would have to be examined if they survived the night. The last thing he saw before leaving the boarding house was Ruby's face in an upstairs window, her small hand pressed against the glass in farewell. The sight strengthened his resolve more than any weapon could have. Some things were worth fighting for, some things were worth killing for, and some things were worth dying for. Nathan Cross was about to find out which category his newfound family fell into. The autumn wind carried the scent of smoke and death as Angel McKenna rode hard through the darkness, the thunder of pursuing hoofbeats growing closer with each passing mile. Behind her, Silver Creek burned in scattered patches of orange light, while ahead lay the narrow mouth of Devil's Canyon and either salvation or slaughter. She'd chosen the fastest horse in Mrs. Chen's stable, a spirited mare named Lightning, who seemed to understand the urgency of their midnight flight. Angel had shed her schoolteacher's dress for practical riding clothes, borrowed from Victoria Blackwood, and James's gun belt sat heavy around her waist. The plan was simple in theory: lead Blackwood's raiders through the canyon pass, where Nathan and his men waited in ambush. In practice, it required staying just far enough ahead of armed killers to keep them interested, but not so far that they'd give up the chase. Angel glanced back and counted at least 15 riders in pursuit, their faces hidden by bandanas and their intentions clear from the weapons they carried. At their head rode Cornelius Blackwood himself, his distinctive silhouette unmistakable even in the moonlight. "Come on," she thought grimly. "Follow the rabbit into the trap." Lightning's hooves struck sparks from the rocky trail as they approached the canyon entrance. Angel could see the narrow walls rising on either side, creating the perfect killing ground for the men she prayed were already in position above. But first she had to make it through alive. The canyon mouth swallowed them into deeper darkness, the sound of hoofbeats echoing off stone walls like thunder. Angel leaned low over Lightning's neck, trusting the mare's sure footing on the treacherous path. Behind her, Blackwood's voice carried clearly in the confined space. "Don't let her reach the other side. Take her alive if you can, dead if you can't." Angel spurred Lightning harder, feeling the mare respond with a burst of speed that opened the distance between pursuer and pursued. The far end of the canyon was visible now, a lighter patch of sky framed by towering stone walls. Almost there, almost to safety. That's when Lightning stepped wrong on a loose stone and stumbled. Angel felt the mare going down and threw herself from the saddle, rolling hard against the canyon wall as Lightning crashed to the rocky ground with a scream of pain. The mare's front leg was clearly broken, and Angel's heart clenched with grief for the brave animal who'd carried her so far. But grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Blackwood's men were seconds behind, and she was trapped in the killing ground with nowhere to run. Angel drew James's Colt and took what cover she could behind a fallen boulder, hoping Nathan and his men were ready for what came next. The first of Blackwood's riders rounded the bend at full gallop, his attention focused on the downed horse and the woman crouched behind the rocks. He never saw the muzzle flash from the ridge above. The shot echoed like cannon fire in the confined space, and the rider pitched from his saddle to lie still on the canyon floor. More flashes erupted from the heights as Nathan's ambush sprung into deadly action. Chaos erupted in the narrow passage. Horses reared and screamed as bullets rained down from above. Men shouted curses and returned fire at targets they couldn't see, their shots sparking harmlessly off stone walls. Angel pressed herself lower behind her boulder as lead flew in all directions. This was the most dangerous moment, caught between Blackwood's men below and friendly fire from above. "It's a trap," one of the raiders screamed. "We're sitting ducks down here." "Fall back," Blackwood's voice cut through the gunfire. "Everyone fall back." But retreat was easier ordered than accomplished. The canyon walls funneled the riders into a narrow space where the dead and wounded created obstacles to escape. Panic spread through the raiders as they realized they were caught in a perfectly executed ambush. Angel saw her chance and took it. Rising from cover, she put 2 quick shots into the nearest raider, dropping him from his horse. The animal bolted toward the canyon mouth, adding to the confusion. There, Blackwood spotted her muzzle flash and wheeled his horse around. The woman she led us into this. Three riders followed Blackwood's charge toward Angel's position, their guns blazing. Angel emptied the Colt's remaining chambers, taking down one more man before diving for better cover as bullets chipped stone all around her. She was reloading when she heard the sound that made her blood run cold, the distinctive whistle of a ricochet, followed by a cry of pain from the ridge above. Someone up there had been hit. Angel peered through the darkness, trying to spot Nathan among the muzzle flashes on the heights. She found him just as he rose to get a better shot at Blackwood, his distinctive silhouette visible against the stars. "Nathan, get down!" she screamed. But her warning came too late. Blackwood's rifle spoke, and Nathan spun backward, clutching his shoulder as he disappeared from view. Rage exploded through Angel's chest. She'd lost James to this bastard's schemes, and she'd be damned if she'd lose Nathan too. Drawing the Derringer from her boot, Angel left her cover and charged straight at Blackwood's position. The move was so unexpected, so suicidally brave, that the remaining raiders hesitated for a crucial second. Angel made the most of that hesitation. The Derringer's first shot took down the rider to Blackwood's left. The second caught Blackwood's horse in the chest, sending the animal crashing down and pinning its rider beneath its weight. "End of the line, Cornelius," Angel said, standing over the trapped man with James's reloaded Colt aimed at his head. Blackwood looked up at her, his face twisted with pain and fury. "You think this changes anything? I have men positioned all around this territory. Kill me, and they'll burn every ranch, every farm, every—" "No, they won't." Nathan's voice came from the canyon rim above, rough with pain, but alive. "Because by morning, every sheriff and marshal in 3 territories will have copies of those documents Victoria gave us. Your railroad conspiracy is finished." Angel kept her gun trained on Blackwood while looking up at Nathan. Even in the moonlight, she could see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "How bad?" she called. "I'll live. Can't say the same for our friend there if he doesn't start talking." Blackwood's defiance cracked as he realized his situation. Trapped beneath a dead horse surrounded by armed men with evidence of his crimes already in the hands of the law. "What do you want to know?" "Start with James McKenna," Angel said coldly. "Who killed my brother and why?" Blackwood's eyes darted between Angel and Nathan. "McKenna was getting too close to the truth about our land acquisition plans. Morrison decided he was a liability. Morrison pulled the trigger. Morrison gave the order. Snake Morrison, no relation despite the name. He's the one who actually shot your brother." Angel felt a piece of her heart that had been frozen for months finally begin to thaw. "Where is he now?" "Denver, waiting for word that Silver Creek has been cleared of obstacles." Nathan's voice carried down from above. "Tommy, ride to the telegraph office. Send word to Marshal Davison in Denver about Morrison. Include everything from Victoria's documents." "Right away, Sheriff." Angel heard the sound of a horse galloping away, carrying word that would finally bring justice for James's death. But her immediate concern was for Nathan, who was clearly losing blood from his wound. "We need to get you to Doc Harrison," she called up to him. "In a minute. First, we need to make sure all of Blackwood's men are accounted for." It took another hour to secure the canyon and tend to the wounded. 3 of Blackwood's raiders were dead, 5 more wounded badly enough to need medical attention. On Nathan's side, only 2 men had been hit, Nathan himself and Pete, who'd taken a graze across his ribs that looked worse than it was. Angel worked alongside Doc Harrison to stabilize the wounded, her medical training proving invaluable in the aftermath of the battle. But her eyes kept returning to Nathan, who'd refused treatment until all his men were cared for. "Stubborn fool," she muttered, as she finally cornered him near the canyon mouth. "Sit down and let me look at that shoulder. It's just a flesh wound. It's a bullet wound that's been bleeding for over an hour. Sit." Nathan sat. Angel cut away the blood-soaked fabric of his shirt, revealing a furrow where Blackwood's bullet had plowed across his shoulder muscle. Painful and bloody, but not life-threatening if properly treated. "You're lucky," she said, cleaning the wound with whiskey from Doc Harrison's medical kit. "Few inches lower, and it would have hit the lung." Nathan hissed as the alcohol burned but didn't pull away. "Few inches higher, and I'd have been wearing a halo." "Don't joke about dying." Angel's voice was sharper than she'd intended. "I've seen enough good men die to last several lifetimes. Including James. Including James." Angel began bandaging the wound with efficient, gentle movements. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you about why I really came to Silver Creek. I figured you'd come to investigate James's death." That was part of it. Angel's hand stilled for a moment. But not all of it. Nathan studied her face in the lamplight. What aren't you telling me? Angel took a deep breath, knowing this conversation would change everything between them. Do you remember what you said when you were delirious with fever at Gettysburg about Elena? Not really, just fragments. You said you were going to marry her when the war ended. You said she was waiting for you in a place called Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory. Nathan's eyes widened as the understanding began to dawn. You knew where I was. I've known for 15 years. Angel's voice was barely above a whisper. I could have found you anytime I wanted. But you didn't. I didn't because I thought you were happy. I thought you'd found your Elena and built the life you dreamed about during those terrible nights in the field hospital. Nathan was quiet for a long moment processing this revelation. So what changed? What made you come looking for me now? Angel's composure finally cracked, and Nathan saw the pain she'd been carrying all these years. I got a letter from James 3 months before he died. He mentioned that he was working with a sheriff named Nathan Cross, and something about the description made me wonder if it could be you. I started asking questions, and you learned about Elena's death. I learned that the man who'd talked about love and hope and building something beautiful in the wilderness had lost everything that mattered to him. Angel's eyes filled with tears she'd held back for too long. I couldn't bear the thought of you facing that kind of pain alone. Nathan reached up with his good arm and gently touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. So you came to Silver Creek to save me. I came to Silver Creek because I've been half in love with you since I was 19 years old, and I couldn't stand the thought of you suffering when I might be able to help. The words hung between them like a bridge across 15 years of separation and loss. Nathan stared into Angel's green eyes, seeing not just the competent nurse or the determined woman seeking justice for her brother, but the young girl who'd saved his life and stolen his heart without either of them realizing it. Angel, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you too. What? Elena and I, we were happy for a while, but she always knew there was a part of my heart that belonged to someone else. To a nurse with green eyes who appeared like an angel in the darkest moment of my life and then vanished just as mysteriously. Angel's breath caught. Nathan, I never forgot you. Even when I married Elena, even when Ruby was born, there was always this wondering, this sense that I'd left something unfinished back in that field hospital. Before Angel could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their moment. Nathan instinctively reached for his gun, then relaxed as he recognized Tommy's voice. Sheriff Cross, Tommy Rivera, appeared at the canyon mouth, his horse lathered and his face flushed with excitement. What is it, Tommy? Word from Denver, sir. Marshal Davidson arrested Snake Morrison 2 hours ago. Had him dead to rights with Miss Blackwood's documents. Tommy grinned widely. And there's more. The territorial governor is sending a special prosecutor to handle the railroad conspiracy case. Looks like Blackwood and his whole organization are going down. Nathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying since the night James McKenna died. Good, that's good. There's something else, Sheriff. Personal message from the marshal. He said to tell you that your reputation preceded you, and if you ever want a job with the territorial marshals, the position's yours for the asking. Angel looked at Nathan with surprise. Would you consider it? No. Nathan's answer was immediate and certain. My life is in Silver Creek, with Ruby, with... He trailed off suddenly, uncertain how to define what was happening between them. Angel saved him from having to finish the sentence. With the people who matter most. Yeah, with the people who matter most. Tommy cleared his throat diplomatically. Sheriff, there's one more thing. Ruby's been asking for you and Miss McKenna. Mrs. Chen said she won't go to sleep until she knows you're both safe. The mention of Ruby reminded Nathan of responsibilities beyond his own feelings. Whatever was developing between him and Angel would have to be considered carefully with his daughter's needs coming first. We should head back to town, he said, allowing Angel to help him to his feet. Ruby's been through enough trauma for one night. The ride back to Silver Creek was subdued with wounded men requiring careful transport and the grim business of dealing with the dead. Nathan rode beside an Angel, both of them lost in thought about everything that had been revealed in the canyon. Dawn was breaking over the mountains by the time they reached the edge of town. The first thing Nathan saw was smoke rising from several buildings. Not the destructive blaze of Blackwood's attack, but the controlled fires of cleanup and rebuilding. The second thing he saw was Ruby running toward them from the direction of the church, her small legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. Nathan dismounted carefully his wounded shoulder, protesting, and caught his daughter as she launched herself into his arms. Ruby's hands moved frantically, telling him everything at once, how scared she'd been, how Mrs. Chen had kept everyone calm in the church basement, how she'd known he was hurt even before Tommy brought word of the battle. "I'm fine, little star," Nathan assured her, though the movement of holding her sent fire through his shoulder. "Just a scratch." Ruby pulled back and examined his bandaged shoulder with the serious expression she brought to all important matters. Then she turned to Angel, who had dismounted and was watching the reunion with soft eyes. To Nathan's amazement, Ruby reached for Angel with the same trust she'd shown her father, wrapping her small arms around the woman's waist. Angel knelt to Ruby's level, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hello, sweetheart. Were you very brave while we were gone?" Ruby nodded solemnly, then began signing something complex to Angel. Nathan started to translate, then stopped in shock as Angel signed back fluently. "You know sign language. I learned it from a deaf soldier at the hospital in Boston," Angel explained. "Ruby was telling me that she's glad I came to Silver Creek because you smile differently now." Differently how? Ruby's hands moved again, and Angel translated with a slight blush. "She says you smile like you used to before Mama died, like you remember how to be happy." Nathan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Trust Ruby to see what the adults had been too complicated to acknowledge. Mrs. Chen appeared at Angel's shoulder, her practical nature asserting itself despite the emotional reunion. "Sheriff Cross, you need rest and proper medical attention. Miss McKenna, you look like you could use the same." She fixed them both with the stern look of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The town will survive without its heroes for a few hours while you recover." Father Miguel approached from the church, his usually serene face showing the strain of the long night. "Sheriff, I wanted you to know that all the families made it safely to shelter. Thanks to Miss Blackwood's warning and your plan, we didn't lose a single civilian." Victoria Blackwood herself appeared from behind the priest, her face haggard but determined. "Sheriff Cross, I wanted to apologize again for my father's actions, and to ask, what happens now, to me, I mean." Nathan studied the young woman who'd risked everything to warn them of her father's plans. "That depends on what you want to happen, Miss Blackwood. I want to stay in Silver Creek if the town will have me. I want to help rebuild what my father tried to destroy." "It won't be easy," Angel warned gently. "People might not trust you at first." "I understand, but I can't undo what my family did by running away from it." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "I have skills, bookkeeping, organizing, managing supplies. Maybe I can find a way to be useful." Nathan made a decision that surprised even himself. The town council's been looking for someone to manage the Civic Improvements Fund. Position doesn't pay much, but it comes with respect and the chance to make a real difference. Victoria's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you, Sheriff. I won't let you down." As the group began to disperse, Angel fell into step beside Nathan as they walked toward the boarding house. Ruby had taken Angel's hand as naturally as breathing, creating an image of family that made Nathan's chest tight with possibility. "Nathan, Angel said quietly, "we still need to finish our conversation." "I know, but first I need to sleep for about 12 hours, and you probably need the same." "Probably, aren't I?" Angel's smile held exhaustion and something deeper. "But when we wake up, we'll figure out what comes next." Ruby tugged on both their hands, her expression suddenly serious. Her signs were directed at both adults. "Are you going to get married like Mama and Papa did?" Nathan nearly choked while Angel blushed furiously. "Ruby," Nathan said carefully, "Miss Angel and I are friends, good friends." Ruby's expression suggested she wasn't buying that explanation for a second. Her neck signs were pointed. "Friends don't look at each other the way you two do, and friends don't make each other smile like that." Angel laughed despite her embarrassment. "Your daughter is very observant, Sheriff." "She gets it from her mother," Nathan said, automatically, then paused as he realized something. For the first time since Elena's death, mentioning his late wife didn't bring the crushing weight of guilt and loss. Instead, he felt only gratitude for the love they'd shared and hope for what might be possible now. Ruby caught the change in his tone and signed something that made Angel's breath catch. What did she say? Nathan asked. She said that Mama Elena would like me, and that she thinks Mama sent me here to take care of both of you. Nathan stopped walking and turned to face Angel fully. In the growing daylight, with his daughter's hand linking them together and the promise of a new day spreading across the sky, he found himself saying words he'd never expected to speak again. Angel McKenna, would you consider staying in Silver Creek? Not as the school teacher, but as part of our family. Angel's green eyes searched his face, looking for certainty in a question that would change all their lives. Are you asking me to marry you, Nathan Cross? I'm asking if you'd be willing to find out where this leads us. All of us. Nathan glanced down at Ruby, who was watching the exchange with bright, hopeful eyes. If you'd be willing to help me figure out how to be happy again. Angel was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from Nathan to Ruby and back again. When she spoke, her voice was steady with conviction. I came to Silver Creek looking for justice for my brother. I found that, but I also found something I hadn't dared to hope for. She squeezed Ruby's hand gently. I found a family that needs me as much as I need them. Is that a yes? Angel stood on her toes and kissed Nathan gently, mindful of his wounded shoulder. That's a yes to staying and went to seeing where this leads, and a yes to helping you remember how to be happy. Ruby clapped her hands in delight, then signed something that made both adults laugh. What now? Nathan asked. She wants to know if this means she can call me Mama Angel. Angel translated, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan looked down at his daughter, then at the woman who'd appeared like an answer to prayers he'd been afraid to voice. What do you think, little star? Would you like Angel to be part of our family? Ruby's answering smile was brighter than the sunrise spreading across the Wyoming sky. Her hands moved with enthusiastic certainty. Yes, and I think we should have a big wedding so everyone in town can celebrate with us. As they continued toward the boarding house, Nathan found himself thinking about second chances and the mysterious ways life could circle back on itself. 15 years ago, Angel had saved his life in a field hospital. Now she'd saved his soul in a dusty frontier town. Some things, he reflected, were worth waiting for, and some people were worth building a new life around. 3 months later, on the first warm day of spring, Silver Creek was preparing for the wedding of the century. At least that's how Mrs. Chen described it, as she supervised the transformation of the town's main street into something approaching civilization. Nathan stood in the boarding house parlor, fighting with his collar and wondering how he'd let Ruby talk him into such an elaborate ceremony. The simple exchange of vows he'd originally envisioned had grown into a town-wide celebration complete with bunting, a brass band borrowed from the next county, and enough food to feed half of Wyoming territory. Stop fidgeting, Doc Harrison ordered, adjusting Nathan's black string tie for the third time. You're getting married, not facing a firing squad. Sometimes I wonder about the difference, Nathan muttered, then immediately felt guilty for the joke. The truth was he'd never been happier or more terrified in his life. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of change. Angel had indeed given up her position as schoolteacher. Victoria Blackwood had proven surprisingly effective in that role and had instead established a medical practice alongside Doc Harrison. Her experience with trauma medicine had already saved several lives, and the town council had officially appointed her as Silver Creek's first registered nurse. More importantly, she'd become an integral part of Nathan and Ruby's daily life. She'd moved into the boarding house's largest room, maintaining a propriety while becoming the mother Ruby had never had and the partner Nathan had thought he'd lost forever. Sheriff Tommy Rivera appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his best uniform. The bride's asking if you're ready, says she doesn't want to keep the whole territory waiting. Nathan took a deep breath and checked his appearance one final time in Mrs. Chen's mirror. The man looking back at him bore little resemblance to the broken sheriff who'd been afraid to touch his gun 6 months ago. This man stood straight, smiled easily, and wore the expression of someone who'd found his way home after a long, difficult journey. I'm ready. The walk to the church took Nathan past the entire population of Silver Creek and what seemed like half the surrounding territory. Word of the wedding had spread far beyond the town's borders, drawing friends, family, and the simply curious from as far away as Denver. Marshal Davidson had come down from the territorial capital, along with the special prosecutor who'd successfully convicted Cornelius Blackwood and his co-conspirators. The railroad conspiracy trials had made headlines across the West, establishing Silver Creek as a symbol of frontier justice and honest law enforcement. But Nathan's attention was focused on the church steps where Ruby waited in her best dress, a basket of rose petals in her hands, and a smile that could have powered the territorial telegraph system. "Papa," she called out, her voice clear and strong. Ruby had begun speaking again gradually, her words returning as her sense of safety and family grew stronger. "Mama Angel says she's ready if you are." Nathan's heart still skipped at hearing Ruby call Angel Mama, though 3 months of practice had begun to make it feel natural. Angel had never tried to replace Elena in Ruby's memory, but had instead created a new kind of maternal love that honored the past while embracing the future. Father Miguel waited at the altar with the patient smile of a man who'd performed countless weddings but still found joy in each new beginning. Behind him, the church was packed with friendly faces and decorated with enough flowers to stock a Denver greenhouse. Nathan took his position at the altar and tried to calm his suddenly racing heart. This was really happening. After 4 years of believing he'd never love again, never risk his heart on another person, he was about to pledge his life to the woman who'd healed his wounds and taught him that second chances were real. The church doors opened and Angel appeared. Nathan's breath stopped entirely. She wore a simple white dress that Sarah Chen had sewn from imported silk, her auburn hair arranged in an elegant style that left soft tendrils framing her face. But it was her expression that undid him completely, radiant joy mixed with absolute certainty, the look of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and had found it. Angel walked down the aisle without escort, her independence, a point of pride that Nathan had learned to admire rather than question. She'd made this choice freely as an equal partner rather than a dependent, and that made her commitment all the more meaningful. When she reached the altar, Angel handed her bouquet to Ruby and took Nathan's hands in hers. Her green eyes held his steadily, and Nathan saw his own wonder reflected there. "Dearly beloved," Father Miguel began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathan Cross and Evangeline McKenna in holy matrimony." Nathan heard the words, responded when prompted, and somehow managed to get his wedding ring onto Angel's finger without dropping it. But his attention was focused entirely on the woman beside him, on the miracle of her presence in his life, and the promise of all the years ahead. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Angel with the tenderness of a man who'd learned not to take love for granted. The congregation erupted in cheers and applause, but Nathan heard only the sound of Angel's soft laughter against his lips. "I love you, Mrs. Cross," he whispered. "I love you too, Sheriff Cross," she whispered back. "Forever and always." Ruby launched herself at them both, wrapping her arms around their legs and declaring loudly enough for the entire church to hear, "Now we're really a family." The reception that followed was everything Ruby had dreamed of and more. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family in the valley. The borrowed brass band played waltzes and reels with enthusiasm that made up for any lack of polish. Children ran between the dancers while their parents celebrated the kind of happy ending that was rare enough on the frontier to be cherished. Nathan danced with his new wife as the sun set behind the mountains, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. Angel had changed from her wedding dress into a practical blue gown that allowed for easier movement, and her face glowed with happiness and contentment. "Any regrets, Mrs. Cross?" Nathan asked as they swayed to a gentle waltz. "Only one," Angel replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Nathan's heart skipped. "What's that?" "That it took us 15 years to find each other again." Nathan laughed and spun her around, drawing cheers from the watching crowd. "Well, we've got at least 50 more years to make up for lost time." "Is that a promise, Sheriff?" "That's a guarantee, Nurse Cross." As the evening wore on, Nathan found himself stepping back from the celebration to simply watch the people he cared about enjoying themselves. Ruby was teaching some of the younger children a complicated clapping game, her laughter ringing across the square. Doc Harrison was telling war stories to anyone who'd listen, his medical bag close at hand, in case the festivities got too enthusiastic. Victoria Blackwood was deep in conversation with the territorial prosecutor about establishing a legal aid society for frontier families. And Angel was everywhere at once, checking on elderly guests, mediating a dispute between two ranchers' wives, and somehow managing to keep the food tables organized without appearing to work at all. "She's something special, isn't she?" Nathan turned to find Marshall Davidson at his elbow, a glass of punch in one hand and an expression of genuine admiration on his weathered face. "That she is, Marshall. You know, the territorial government's been talking about establishing some new positions. Deputy marshals with medical training specifically for areas where doctors are scarce. Davidson's tone was casual, but Nathan caught the underlying offer. Position would come with a good salary territory-wide, jurisdiction, and the backing of the federal government. Nathan considered the proposition for about 3 seconds. Thanks, but no. My place is here in Silver Creek. Even if the position came with a house in the territorial capital, access to the best schools for your daughter. Especially then. Nathan's voice was firm but friendly. Ruby's had enough upheaval in her life. She needs stability roots, a place where she can grow up knowing she belongs. Davidson nodded approvingly. Good answer, though the offer stands if you ever change your mind. As the marshal moved away, Nathan felt Angel's presence at his side before he saw her. Turning down federal positions already? She asked with amusement. We've been married for exactly 6 hours and you're already making major career decisions without consulting your wife. Some decisions don't require consultation, Nathan replied, slipping his arm around her waist. My life is here. Our life is here. Angel leaned against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. I'm glad, though I have to admit, part of me is curious about what other adventures might be waiting out there. Are you already getting restless, Mrs. Cross? Never restless. But I think we've proven that the Cross family handles adventures pretty well when we face them together. Nathan was about to respond when Ruby appeared at their side, tugging on Angel's skirt with the urgency that meant she had something important to communicate. What is it, sweetheart? Angel asked automatically, switching to the combination of speech and sign language they'd developed as a family. Ruby's hands moved quickly. There's a man coming, on a very tired horse. He's hurt and scared. Nathan immediately scanned the edge of the square, his lawman's instincts taking over despite the festive atmosphere. Sure enough, a lone rider was approaching from the south, his horse stumbling with exhaustion and the man himself swaying in the saddle. Doc, Nathan called out, already moving toward the stranger. We've got a wounded man coming in. The celebration paused as the rider reached the edge of the square and promptly fell from his horse, landing hard in the dust. Nathan reached him first with Angel and Doc Harrison close behind. The man was young, maybe 25, with the lean build of a cowboy and clothes that had seen hard traveling. Blood stained his shirt from a wound in his side, and his eyes held the wild look of someone who'd ridden through hell to deliver a message. Sheriff Cross, he gasped, recognizing Nathan's badge. That's me. What's your name, son? Billy. Billy Morrison. From Sage Valley, 2 days south of here. The young man struggled to sit up despite Angel's gentle attempts to keep him still. They're all dead, Sheriff, the whole town. Wiped out. Nathan felt ice form in his stomach. Who's dead? What happened? Raiders hit us 3 days ago, but not ordinary raiders. Billy's voice grew stronger with urgency. These men were organized, disciplined, military discipline, and they were looking for something specific. Angel had been examining Billy's wound during his report, her professional manner returning automatically. Bullet wound about 3 days old, infected but not fatal if we treat it properly. Can you travel? Nathan asked Billy. Sheriff, you don't understand. They weren't after money or cattle. They were asking questions about someone, about a woman. Nathan's blood chilled. What kind of questions? About a nurse, a woman with red hair and green eyes. They said she'd stolen something from them, something valuable. Billy's eyes found Angel's face. Sheriff, I think they were looking for your wife. The celebration around them had gone silent. The word of Billy's news spread through the crowd. Nathan was aware of concerned faces, of hands moving toward odd weapons, of the subtle shift that transformed a wedding party into an armed frontier community ready to defend itself. Angel's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. Billy, did these raiders say who they were working for? They did, ma'am. Said they represented something called the Brotherhood of the Phoenix. Said they'd been tracking you for months and that you'd taken something that belonged to them. Nathan had never heard of the Brotherhood of the Phoenix, but Angel's sharp intake of breath told him she had. Angel, he said quietly. What is he talking about? Angel was silent for a long moment, her mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of long-held secrets. There's something I never told you about my time in Boston, about why I really left to come west. Nathan felt a familiar chill that preceded bad news. What kind of something? The kind that might have followed me here to Silver Creek. Before Angel could explain further, Ruby tugged urgently on Nathan's sleeve. Her signing was rapid and frightened. More bad men coming. Many more. And they're angry about something. Nathan looked toward the horizon and saw what his daughter's enhanced senses had detected: first dust clouds moving towards Silver Creek from multiple directions. Not the random approach of individual travelers, but the coordinated advance of organized groups. How many, little star? Ruby's expression was grave beyond her years. Too many to fight, but maybe not too many to outwit. Nathan made a series of quick decisions that would define everything that followed. Doc, get Billy to your clinic and patch him up. Tommy, start organizing the men, every rifle in town positioned at the most defensible spots. Mrs. Chen, get the women and children to the church basement. Nathan, Angel said quietly, if they're really after me, maybe I should what, sacrifice yourself to save the town? Nathan's voice was firm. Not happening, Mrs. Cross. We're in this together, remember? Angel's eyes filled with gratitude and love, but also with fear for the people she'd brought. Retry JN continued by edit danger too. You don't understand what we're dealing with. The Brotherhood isn't just a group of raiders. They're former Confederate officers who've been operating in the shadows since the war ended, building a network of influence and power across the territories. And you crossed them somehow. I didn't just cross them, I destroyed them. Angel's voice was steady, but Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders. In Boston, I discovered they were using veterans' hospitals to recruit broken soldiers for illegal operations. When I tried to expose them, they threatened to kill James unless I disappeared. Nathan felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. So you came west to protect your brother, and to steal something they valued more than money. Angel reached into her traveling bag and pulled out a small leather journal. This contains the names, locations, and criminal activities of every Brotherhood cell from Texas to Montana. I've been carrying it for 6 months, waiting for the right moment to turn it over to federal authorities. Marshal Davidson, who had been listening with growing alarm, stepped forward. Mrs. Cross, do you realize what you're holding? The evidence needed to destroy a Confederate resurrection movement that's been operating outside the law for 15 years. And they've tracked you here to get it back. Nathan looked around the square where his wedding guests were rapidly transforming into a defensive force. These were good people, brave people, but they weren't soldiers. If the Brotherhood had brought a large enough force, how long do we have? He asked Billy. Maybe an hour based on how fast they were moving when I left Sage Valley. Ruby appeared at Nathan's side again, her small face serious. Papa, there's something else. The bad men, they're not all together. Some are coming from the north, some from the south. They're trying to surround the town. Nathan's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. A coordinated attack from multiple directions meant experienced military leadership and enough manpower to execute complex operations. Angel, he said quietly, how many men are we talking about? At their peak, the Brotherhood had over 200 active members across all territories, but most of those were part-time affiliates. The core group, the real fanatics. Angel's face was grim. Maybe 30 or 40 men who'd die before giving up their cause. Well, Doc Harrison said with dark humor, at least we're not completely outnumbered. Nathan began issuing orders with the calm efficiency of a man who'd commanded troops in desperate situations. Tommy, I want riflemen in the church bell tower, the hotel's 3rd floor, and on top of the general store. Create overlapping fields of fire covering all approaches to the town center. Right away, Sheriff. Pete, take 4 men and set up a defensive position at the north end of Main Street. Use the water troughs and anything else you can find for cover. What about the south approach? I'll handle that myself. Nathan turned to Angel. You're going to the church with Ruby and the other civilians. Like hell I am. Nathan started to argue, then caught the look in Angel's eyes. This was the woman who'd led Blackwood's raiders into a canyon ambush, who'd charged armed men with nothing but a derringer and determination. What do you have in mind? Angel's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm going to give the Brotherhood exactly what they want. Me. Angel, no. Not as a sacrifice, Nathan, as bait again. Angel's voice grew stronger as her plan took shape. They want this journal and they want me to pay for betraying them. But they also want to make a statement to show the territories that crossing the Brotherhood has consequences. Nathan was beginning to understand her logic even as every protective instinct screamed against it. You want to draw them into another trap. I want to draw them into the perfect trap, one they'll design themselves. Angel looked around the square, noting positions and sight lines with the eye of someone who understood military tactics. If I position myself prominently enough, they'll focus their entire attack on capturing me alive. That means they'll come straight up Main Street instead of trying to flank us. Creating a killing field, Marshall Davidson observed with professional appreciation. Creating an opportunity to end this permanently. Angel's voice was cold with determination. The Brotherhood has been hiding in shadows for 15 years, picking off isolated targets and disappearing before the law could respond. But if we can force them into open combat, we can destroy them completely, Nathan finished. But Angel, you'd be completely exposed. One lucky shot. Won't happen. Angel's confidence was absolute. Because my husband is the best marksman in 3 territories, and he'll be watching over me. Ruby tugged on Nathan's sleeve again, her expression urgent. Her signing was rapid. The bad men are getting closer. But Mama Angel is right. If we're all together, we can protect each other. Nathan looked at his 8-year-old daughter, amazed once again by her wisdom and insight. Ruby had survived the worst tragedy imaginable and emerged stronger, more intuitive, more capable of seeing truth than most adults. All right, he said finally, but we do this smart. Angel, you'll position yourself on the hotel balcony where you're visible but have some cover. I'll be across the street with a clear shot at anyone who tries to reach you. And I'll be covering your back, Marshall Davidson added. This Brotherhood sounds like exactly the kind of problem the territorial government needs to solve permanently. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons were distributed, positions assigned, and final messages sent to loved ones. Nathan found himself checking and rechecking his rifle muscle memory from years of frontier combat taking over. Angel had changed from her wedding dress into practical clothes and positioned herself prominently on the hotel's second-floor balcony, the stolen journal clearly visible in her hands. She looked calm, composed, and completely unafraid, which made Nathan love her even more and worry about her even more. Ruby had been installed in the church basement with the other children, but Nathan could see her small face pressed against the high window, her eyes wide with concern for her parents. Nathan, Angel called softly from the balcony. Yeah. In case this goes badly, I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. It's not going badly, Nathan replied firmly. We're going home together, Mrs. Cross, all 3 of us. Promise? Nathan checked his rifle one more time and took aim at the southern approach to Main Street. Promise. The sound of approaching hoofbeats reached them 5 minutes later, not the thunderous charge of raiders, but the disciplined advance of cavalry. Nathan counted at least 20 riders approaching from the south, with dust clouds suggesting similar numbers from the north. The Brotherhood had indeed come in force. At their head rode a man Nathan recognized from wanted posters, Colonel Jeremiah Kane, former Confederate officer and founding member of the Brotherhood of the Phoenix. Kane was a legend in certain circles, brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely committed to the cause of Confederate resurrection. Evangeline McKenna, Kane's voice carried clearly across the square. I know you can hear me. You have something that belongs to the Brotherhood. Angel stepped to the edge of the balcony, making herself clearly visible. Colonel Kane, I was wondering when you'd finally show your face. You betrayed sacred trusts, Miss McKenna. You stole property and caused the death of good men. I exposed war criminals and prevented more innocent people from dying. Angel's voice rang with righteous anger. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Kane's horse pranced nervously as its rider's anger became visible. Return what you stole, and your death will be quick. Come and take it. Angel held the journal high above her head, then deliberately dropped it onto the balcony floor and kicked it toward the edge. The gesture was clear. The information Kane wanted was within reach, but only if he was willing to risk everything to get it. Kane took the bait exactly as Angel had predicted. Brotherhood, take the building. Bring me the woman alive. The attack came as a thunderous charge up Main Street with 20 mounted men converging on the hotel in a coordinated assault. But Nathan and his defenders were ready. The first volley from the church bell tower and rooftop positions cut down 3 riders immediately. The second volley fired as the survivors reached the middle of the street dropped 4 more. Kane's tactical experience showed as he immediately adapted to the ambush, dividing his remaining men into dismounted assault teams that took cover behind water troughs and building corners. "Suppressing fire on those rooftops," Kane shouted. "Alpha team, take the hotel, Bravo team flank left." Nathan had positioned himself perfectly to intercept the flanking movement. As 5 Brotherhood men attempted to circle around the general store, Nathan's rifle spoke with deadly precision. 3 men fell before the survivors realized they were under fire from an unexpected direction. "Sheriff," one of the wounded raiders called out, "we know who you are, the famous Nathan Cross. Join us, and we'll make you rich beyond imagining." Nathan's response was another perfectly placed shot that sent the speaker tumbling into the dust. The battle raged for 20 minutes with professional soldiers on both sides demonstrating the brutal efficiency of experienced combat. But the Brotherhood's advantage in numbers was offset by the defenders' superior positions and intimate knowledge of the terrain. More importantly, Nathan was fighting for his family, while Kane's men were fighting for an abstract cause they'd already lost once. Angel had taken cover behind the balcony railing, but she continued to make herself visible enough to keep the Brotherhood's attention focused on her position. When 3 raiders finally breached the hotel's ground floor, she was ready for them. The first man up the stairs walked into Angel's carefully aimed shot. The second hesitated for a crucial moment, giving Angel time to reload and fire again. The third turned and fled back down the stairs, only to run into Marshal Davidson's shotgun. "Angel," Nathan called out during a brief lull in the fighting. "Status, still here, still breathing, still married to you." Nathan couldn't help but smile even in the middle of a firefight. Trust to Angel to maintain her sense of humor under fire. But the smile faded as he saw Kane himself advancing on the hotel using the bodies of fallen men as cover. The colonel was clearly a veteran of many such battles, moving with the fluid confidence of someone who understood urban combat. Nathan lined up his shot carefully, leading Kane's movement and allowing for wind and distance. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Sheriff Cross." The call came from Ruby, whose voice carried clearly from the church despite the sound of gunfire. Nathan turned to see his daughter pointing frantically toward the north end of town. A second wave of Brotherhood reinforcements was approaching, at least 15 more riders moving fast and obviously intending to hit the defenders from behind while they were engaged with Kane's assault. Nathan faced an impossible choice: continue trying to protect Angel from Kane, or turn to meet the new threat before it could overrun the town's defenses. Angel made the choice for him. "Nathan, go, I can handle Kane." "Angel, go, Ruby needs you to stop those reinforcements." Nathan's training warred with his heart for exactly 3 seconds. Then the sheriff won over the husband, and he was moving toward the north barricades with the fluid efficiency of a man who'd made such impossible choices before. Behind him, he heard Angel's rifle speak twice in rapid succession, followed by Kane's howl of rage and pain. Nathan reached the north barricades just as the Brotherhood reinforcements hit Pete's position. The young deputy and his men were fighting bravely, but they were clearly outmatched by professional soldiers with superior firepower. Nathan's arrival changed the dynamic immediately. His first shot dropped the lead rider. His second shattered the shoulder of the man attempting to flank Pete's position. His third and fourth shots came so close together they sounded like 1 and 2 more raiders fell. Nathan Cross, one of the surviving attackers, called out, recognizing the legendary accuracy. "Should have known you'd be here. Should have stayed in whatever hole you crawled out of," Nathan replied, working the lever action of his rifle. "Last chance to surrender." The Brotherhood's response was a renewed assault, but their heart wasn't in it anymore. Too many of their friends were dead. Their legendary leader was wounded and trapped, and they were facing the most feared gunfighter in the territories. The fight went out of them all at once like air from a punctured balloon. First one man threw down his weapon, then another, then the entire group was surrendering en masse. Nathan left Pete to secure the prisoners and raced back toward the hotel, his heart pounding with fear for Angel's safety. The sounds of combat had died away, but silence on a battlefield could mean many things. He found Angel sitting on the hotel steps, calmly reloading her rifle while Colonel Kane lay unconscious at her feet, blood pooling from a bullet wound in his leg. "Mrs. Cross," Nathan said carefully, "are you injured?" Not a scratch, Sheriff Cross. Angel's smile was radiant. Though I think Colonel Kane might need medical attention. Nathan looked down at the unconscious Brotherhood leader, then at his wife, then back at Kane. What exactly happened here? He tried to take me alive. I convinced him that was a tactical error. Angel stood and brushed dust from her clothes with calm efficiency. He'll live, but he's going to have a permanent limp. Seemed like an appropriate reminder of the price of threatening innocent people. Before Nathan could respond, Ruby burst from the church and ran toward them, followed closely by Mrs. Chen and the other civilians who'd taken shelter during the battle. Papa Mama Angel, Ruby launched herself at both of them simultaneously, her small arms wrapping around their legs. You're both safe. Nathan knelt and gathered his daughter close, marveling at how normal her voice sounded after such extraordinary circumstances. Ruby had been through more trauma in her young life than most adults, but she continued to show remarkable resilience and strength. We're all safe, little star, he assured her. The bad men are gone. Forever. Nathan looked at the journal and Angel still carried, then at the unconscious Kane and the Brotherhood prisoners being secured by his deputies. Forever. Marshal Davidson approached with the satisfied expression of a lawman who just closed a major case. Mrs. Cross, I'll need to examine that journal as evidence for the federal trials. But I can tell you right now that what happened here today is going to make headlines from Washington to San Francisco. Good woman, Angel replied firmly. The Brotherhood has hidden in shadows long enough. Time for the world to see what they really are. Doc Harrison finished bandaging Kane's wounded leg and pronounced the colonel stable enough for transport to the territorial prison. The other wounded would recover, and the dead would be buried in the section of the cemetery reserved for those who died outside the law. As the immediate crisis passed and normal life began to reassert itself, Nathan found himself standing in the middle of Main Street, surrounded by his family and friends, marveling at how quickly a wedding celebration had become a military victory. Sheriff Tommy Rivera approached with the slightly dazed expression of a young man who just survived his first major battle. What do we do now? Nathan looked around at the scene, his wounded but victorious town, his brave and capable wife, his remarkable daughter who'd helped coordinate their defense through pure intuition and courage. Now, he said, with a smile that came from the deepest part of his heart, we finished celebrating my wedding. The party that resumed that evening was different from the one that had been interrupted by Billy Morrison's warning. It was louder, more emotional, and infused with the particular joy that comes from surviving mortal danger in the company of people you love. Nathan danced with Angel as the sun set behind the mountains, both of them still wearing the clothes they'd fought in, and both of them alive and whole and together. So, Angel said as they swayed to music provided by the somewhat reduced brass band, think our marriage is going to be boring. Nathan laughed, spinning her around and drawing cheers from the watching crowd. Mrs. Cross, I don't think boring is a word that will ever apply to our family. Good, Angel replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. I was hoping you'd say that. Ruby appeared at their side, tugging on both their hands with the insistence of a child who had something important to say. What is it, sweetheart? Angel asked. Ruby's expression was serious as she signed her message, but her eyes were bright with happiness. She says Angel translated for the crowd that this was the best wedding ever, and she hopes all our anniversaries are this exciting. The laughter that followed could be heard 3 counties away. As the celebration continued into the night, Nathan found himself thinking about beginnings and endings, about the strange paths that led people to exactly where they needed to be. A year ago, he'd been a broken man, afraid of his own shadow. Tonight, he was standing in the middle of his town, surrounded by people who'd fought alongside him, married to the woman who'd saved his life twice, and father to a daughter who saw the world with extraordinary clarity. The mail-order bride advertisement that had seemed like such a desperate gamble had led to the kind of love story that people would tell around campfires for generations. Nathan, Angel's voice brought him back to the present. Yeah, thank you. For what? For being brave enough to believe in second chances. Nathan pulled his wife close and looked out over the faces of the people who'd become his extended family. Silver Creek was more than just a town now, it was a community, a place where people looked out for each other and stood together against whatever challenges the frontier might bring. Thank you, he replied, for being worth the wait. As the stars came out over Wyoming territory, Three hearts beat in harmony, creating a rhythm of love that would echo through all the years to come. The gunslinger had indeed found his angel. The nurse had found her purpose, and the little girl who saw with more than her eyes had found the family she'd always dreamed of. And in Silver Creek, where legends were born and love conquered, all they lived happily ever after.